Hello there and welcome to this morning's webinar on the School Workforce Census for 2018. This presentation is to deal with those schools completing a full return. One or two things I'd just like to get through. Introductions, myself, I'm joined today by Helen Burns. Say hello, Helen. And not by Jacqueline Redmond, I'm afraid she's been called off. But nevertheless, we'll get through it. First of all, all the documentation that you need will be available, is available already, on the Osmis website at www.osmis.co.uk. And if I were to click that link there, that would take me rather handily off to the Osmis website. Okay, we've got a link up here in the School Workforce Census. You can also get to it through resources and Sims resources, but this one takes you straight to it. And at this point, we can select the full return area. All right, this will take us to a link to all the documentation we need. So we've got a news feed up here describing which people to include and any changes since 2017. Full links to all the documentation. We've got all the capita stuff here, preparing for the School Workforce Census, which takes you through in some detail what you need to do, and then the elements around producing the actual return itself. As with the pupil census, we run checks on the data that we're about to submit, and that will produce a series of errors and validations that we need to work through. And we've also got a link to the full DFE guidance and guidance on how to upload information to collect, or indeed to the local authority. We've introduced a workforce checking report you can download, and you can run it through your reports menu. This will give you a page of A4 per member of staff that you can use just to make sure that you've got the information collected directly from them correctly. We've got options for remote support sessions. If at the end of this you still no nearer knowing what you need to do, then we will be running a series of remote support sessions at which Helen or Jacqueline will remote onto your system. Just check that the data is correct for you and give you a pointer as to what needs doing next. So if you're in any doubt, if you're in any struggle, please do either log a call or book yourselves onto a remote support session. If you need a little more than that, of course, we are available, and you can ask us to remote on and take rather a more extended view of what needs doing in your school, and we can work with you on making sure that you can comply with the requirements of the return. Secure data transfer takes you through the processes of uploading the file once you have created it, and if you're a Blackburn school, a Trafford school, or indeed any other school, you'll find data and information there about how to upload your return file. And we're also going to be maintaining a list of frequently asked questions that you can check there for any particular problems that do seem to be recurring among schools. Okay, I'm recording this webinar, and as long as it makes me look good and Helen look better, then we'll stick it out on DVD and it'll be available for download from the site. Introduction to the Workforce Census. Okay, it's collected every year. It forms the main source of the DFE's data on staff payables, turnover, absences, the deployment of staff according to their qualifications. So maybe we're short of maths teachers, but that's because all the people with maths qualifications are now teaching sciences. The data will inform policy and pay and the monitoring of effectiveness of the school workforce, and it's shared with other government agencies, local authorities, and educational researchers, and the accuracy of the data that you're about to supply is crucial, so we need to get it right. It will form part of the picture of your school that Ofsted bases its evaluations upon. Right, do I have to do it? Yes, I'm afraid you do. All schools have to submit the School Workforce Census return, including this individual staff record element, statutory requirement by virtue of regulation, and as such, members of staff do not have an option. The information that they provide to you and you keep on them is included in the return. Oh, pish. Is included within the return, and we don't have an option. You do need, however, to let the members of staff know that you will be sharing the data in this way, and that's usually done by terms of a fair processing notice. We need to be aware of GDPR implications, and we need to inform the staff about how we're going to be using their data. The Workforce Census return is a collection of a range of information on the school workforce. The key dates that we're looking at, the enumeration date, the census date, is the 8th of November. So as you'll see later on, certain bits of information relate to that particular date. However, information is going to be collected for the whole of the previous academic year. So what we need to do is to make sure that all the absences are correctly recorded for the whole of the previous school year. and indeed all the contractual information is also in our system and correctly recorded. That's right up through to the census date. So that's from the 1st of September 2017 right up to the 8th of November 2018. A couple of changes compared with previous returns if you've done this before. The qualified teacher status box is gone. That's now been subdivided into various different sorts of qualification. And because they couldn't reliably map the data, you'll find that box now greyed out. And it's been replaced by 3 tick boxes. So they're interested in, is the teacher a qualified teacher? Is the teacher qualified to teach in further education, an FE qualified teacher? Is the teacher employed to deliver education in the early years foundation stage? Or are they simply a qualified teacher status? The route still needs to be recorded, and what you should do is tick all that apply in the professional details tab in focus person staff. They're still collecting 2 subjects at the qualification of the member of staff, but the differentiation between the first and second subject is removed, so it's just collecting them no longer ranked. Now, in terms of SIMS permissions, in order to create the return, you need to be a member of 2 permissions groups, that is the personnel officer and returns manager. So your user needs to be in both those groups, and you can set that up in Focus System Manager, Manage Users. Please speak to the person in school responsible for managing your system, and they should be able to arrange that for you. Right, the most complicated part of the whole pigging thing is who to include in the return. And it's basically anybody who's been employed in your school for a period of 28 days or more in the last academic year and up to today in this academic year. So that's from the 1st of September 2017 through to the 7th of November 2018. Anybody who's been employed for 28 days or more at any point during that year. So if they've been employed for 14 days in one part and then 14 days in another, they would qualify. You would need to include them. Anything you can add to clarify that, please, Helen? Helen? Oh no, I've lost Helen. And you would also include any teachers with a service agreement. Now, typically that would be 8. Okay, so I'm just going through, thank you, Helen. We're just going through the who to include in the return section. So when we're talking about teachers with service agreements, basically it's anybody with 28 days or more of continuous or non-continuous service within the school needs to appear somewhere in the return. Yeah, if the contracted staff, they'll appear in the contracted area, or if they're supply teachers that you use an awful lot, then you would need to include them as a service agreement. Is that a fairly clear, potted analysis of who we should include? Okay. Now, in terms of preparing for the return, what we can get on with before we actually go into the returns area, we can look at the school level information. So that's in focus, school details. We need to make sure that the information is correct there as per the pupil census return, really. So if you got through the October return for pupils, chances are you'll be fine with that. In terms of staff information, we need to visit each member of staff's record and check on the employee details tab. We need to make sure they've all got a legal forename and surname that they're correctly recorded. Any previous names need to be recorded, the gender, whether they're eligible for SWR. You can put anybody you want onto SIMS, and if you take the tick out of eligible for SWR, they'll be excluded from the return. We get date of birth, the national insurance number needs to be correct. There's an awful lot of people who don't type that incorrectly, to be perfectly frank. So make sure that's correct. The ethnicity of the member of staff, the qualifications, and they want to know if the day-to-day activities are substantially affected by physical or mental impairment. That needs to go on the employee details tab. The professional details tab, we would record HLTA status regardless of whether or not they're employed as an HLTA, and the date achieved. If the member of staff is employed as a TA, tick the TA status box. Then the qualified teacher status, as described earlier. So we want qualified teacher status, learning and skills status, and early years status. And staff can hold more than one teacher status. So tick all that apply. The route for qualified teacher status is required for anybody who's taken up their first position since qualifying during the last year, even if they're not employed as a teacher. So that needs to be recorded there. Qualifications, record the class of the degree in the first and second subject qualified, and record if you have in fact verified that qualification. I'm sure you all have. Then in employment details tab, if they're primarily employed as a teacher, tick the teaching staff box, enter the teacher number for all staff who have one, and check the employment dates for accuracy. Okay, so make sure all that's up to date. We can then go into contractual information. Now, I'm not going to go into too much depth here, but it's worth saying that you should just make sure that you've updated salary figures for all the service terms used in schools. So that's in tools, staff, pay related. Make sure all that's bang up to date, and do the same for the allowances. Right? So the allowance amounts may have changed since last year. Make sure they're changed and record the award dates under each service term that's used for a member of staff who's going to appear on the return. Annual increments, award annual increments as appropriate within the software. Make sure that's all recorded appropriately. Obviously, the dates are important. And almost finally, we need to check that we've recorded the latest pay review date. That date must fall in the last academic year, so every teaching member of staff, it's expected, will have a pay review during each academic year. That's got to be recorded there. And once again, just give the salary record to one server, make sure that all makes sense. So when people have had an increment, or when they've taken up a new appointment, make sure that you've got them on the right points and so on. Make sure you've got the roles correct as well. We need to make sure that the contracts are correctly recorded, and if employment has changed since last year, ensure that start dates are correctly recorded. And just a little reminder, you should not edit contracts once you've started them, but you would terminate them and then award a new contract. So one would end and another one would start. And remember that you can clone a contract if the same service term is used. It's just a matter of changing the day and the points and so on. Anything to add on contractual data, Helen? Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you. Absences need to go into the records. Make sure that you've got all periods of absence appropriately recorded in there, particularly if you're using cover. That might need. If you're using cover in a secondary school, that will certainly need checking, because cover will automatically generate the absences here, which may be inappropriate if the person's been off on training or whatever. Service agreements. Okay, so this is where you record. So you would record staff that you employ through a third party. So if you're paying some agency through the checkbook, or maybe the local authority through some transfer of funds from your school's bank account for a member of staff to deliver a service, then you need to record them as a service agreement if they have been in school for more than 28 days in the preceding academic year. As I say, it collects information for anybody providing regular service, continuous employment for any period of 28 days or more since the 1st of September 2017. And you need to make sure that they're ticked as eligible for the SWR. All of the information that we've gone through earlier, the ethnicity, the NI number, the date of birth, and so on, all needs to go in. You've got to search for and highlight the required person and open up the employee details, employment details tab, and then go down to the service agreement table and add a new service agreement. These are the data items that you need to enter. So the service start and end date, the post, the service type, whether they're full-time or not, how many weeks a year and how many hours per week they're going to work, the base pay if they're not on a daily rate, the daily rate if they are, the additional amounts, payments, latest pay review date, and the role that they're filling. Anything to add to that, Helen? Absolutely. Okay, so that one needs filling in. So once you've done all that, you've pretty much got your staff data sorted, ready for submission, and you now need to configure the return. In Tools, Statutory Return Tools and Workforce Census Settings, you need to configure the return to include all data areas. So if previously you've submitted a partial return because payroll were doing some, this year you're doing it for the first time. Make sure you've got all those boxes ticked because you're doing the lot. Once they're ticked, you can then go into creating the return, and that's in Routine, Statutory Returns and School Workforce Census. The Workforce Census you use for the pupil census is good for this return. It's the same file that covers both returns, and ensure that the School Workforce Census folder that is selected has appropriate security. This folder will get a load of information about all the staff in school placed into it, and it is not encrypted. You need to make sure that that folder has controlled access. The census level items, once you've entered the staff stuff in. For secondary schools, you need to click out Calculate All Details. What this does, it looks at the information on the timetable, figures out how many hours per week and to which year groups each teacher teaches each subject. That will be calculated for you. If your TAs don't appear on the timetable and you've got them working in classes, then they'll need adding here. But it's a simple matter of editing the information directly on this screen should you need to. It's not too onerous, but that needs doing for secondary schools. The next panel down on this page, as we'll see in a moment, is posts for all types of teachers, from classroom teachers to head teachers need recording as vacancies. So what we need to do is to record the vacancies as at the census day where they've not been filled. And there is the option there to record the tenure, whether it's permanent or temporary, whether you've temporarily filled it, and whether or not you have advertised that post as a vacancy. We're then counting occasional teachers, so basically supply teachers from outside the school with qualified teacher status and without qualified teacher status, and for those that you don't know the status of, it's just a head count of the number of supply teachers you had in school on the census day. Then it talks about agency and third-party support staff, so ITs, technicians, contract cleaners, and so on. People who are in your school, but not directly employed by the school. So it's just a head count of additional members of staff. Okay. So, right, the next step then is to create and validate the return and check the information it contains. As with the pupil census, it's a matter of simply clicking the Create and Validate button up at the top of the page. That produces a list of reported errors, usually, where bits of information are missing or something's not quite adding up. So the red items with the Fs in that first column will be failures and genuinely something you need to address before you can submit the return. The Qs are just highlighting potential issues with the data you're about to submit. You're just asking you to check it. So you've got no pay review dates. Is that correct? Well, actually, it's probably not. So I've got to go back and put my pay review dates in and so on. So in the same way as you do with the pupil census, you would work through those. And once they're all completed, you can then go ahead and start to run off summary, and detailed reports and share them in school as appropriate. So if you've got colleagues that need to check this information out before it gets submitted, then this would be the place to do it. Okay. Once you've got all that sorted and everybody's happy and ready to submit the return, you can then authorize the return. Clicking the authorize button will lock the return down and create an XML file ready for submission in the folder specified in the browse window way earlier on in the process. So wherever it is on the network you're saving these files, that's where the XML file will be. And it's that file that needs uploading either to collect or to the local authority as appropriate. Arrangements for submission vary depending on your circumstance. Academies will upload the file to collect. The maintained schools may well upload to the local authority. And the details for the submission arrangements are on the screen there. Okay, so what I'd like to do now, if I may, is just take you through briefly the production of the workforce census. So having gone through focus person staff and checked off that we have all the appropriate personal details, professional details, and employment details, that we've got all our contracts and salary reviews all sorted out, we can then go in and go Tools, Statutory return tools, school workforce census settings. We make sure that we've got ticks in all these boxes here. And assuming that we do, we go routines, statutory return, and school workforce census. Right, so this is the location. This is where the XML file will end up. And this is where all of the sensitive data is going to be held. Make sure the access to that is controlled. I'm going to create a new return. And the first time through, I click Calculate All Details, which in a secondary setting will populate all that curriculum stuff, which will be a bit of a pain to do without that. We need to enter then vacancies on Census Day. So if we've got if we've got posts held open, I need to pick the post type from the DfE's approved list. So let's say we're holding a vacancy for a deputy head, and it's primary curriculum because I'm in a primary school here. The tenure will be a full-time person. We haven't temporarily filled it, but we have advertised it, and we're quite hopeful we'll get some applicants. So that's all you need to do when you're recording vacancies in the school on the Census Day. Next one will be occasional teachers. So how many teachers do we have in school on the day with qualified teacher status, without qualified teacher status, and those where we do not know whether or not they're qualified teacher status. And then finally, we've got the agency and third-party support staff. So let's say we've got a careers advisor in that isn't directly employed by the school. And we've got one of those. And let's say we've got a lab technician or an IT technician. There you go, IT technician. We've got one of those in as well. In fact, we've got two of them because we're having a bit of work done. So there's two of those going in school. And we click Save. As we go along, Create and Validate will give us the list of things that need looking at. Validation rules being applied. This is the DfE stuff, and it then gives me a list of things that I need to check. So I've got a qualification code missing. Temporary national insurance number has been provided here. I've got to replace this. A member of staff with no ethnicity. The full-time equivalent hours per week is missing for this member of staff. Subject is required, so on and so on. And it's just a case of working through all of these. Pardon me. Just a case of working through these queries until we've addressed them all. Once we've done that, we can run off detailed reports. So if we want to have a look at qualifications. So here's the complete list of staff that are going to get included in the return together with their qualifications, first and second subjects. Helen, is there something you want to say? Oh, I see. She's dealing with a mail or something. Okay, so once you've done all that, once you're happy with it, just click the authorize button. That will then generate the return in the location. I add any notes that may be required to explain things to the DfE once they see explanation. And that then produces the summary reports and the note report. So I can print those off, should I wish to. And that file is now in the location that was described at the start of the return. So DSIMS, census returns, and it will be this XML file here. Okay, that's the file that the DfE will be looking for. And here's a copy of all of those reports. So there's the summary report, if ever I need to get back to it. This is the information that I have submitted for my workforce census this year. Okay, so that's about all I've got to say. Anything to add, Helen? I'm not that boring. There were a few, yes. Yeah, good point. Good point. No, there's definitely something wrong here. Yeah. So we have a look at this. The service term is NJC. Uh-huh. Yeah, indeed. And if you do get something like that, then by all means give us a call. That's what we're good at. Okay, so that's about it now. So thank you very much for your time attending today. I hope you found this session useful, and we look forward to working with you soon with the very best wishes for the return. Thank you very much, Helen, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye now. Bye.